She married a dead man's ghost to save her land, but the stranger who came instead brought a war to her door. Eliza Carter thought she'd wed a gentleman farmer through carefully written letters. What stepped off that iron horse was something else entirely, a man with blood on his hands and vengeance at his heels. When Ronan Hale offered marriage in place of the corpse he'd buried, she had one choice: accept a killer's protection or lose everything her family built. Stay until the end to see if love can grow in gunpowder and ash. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The wind tasted like copper and dust. Eliza Carter stood on the warped planks of Bentley Station, her fingers worrying the envelope in her coat pocket until the paper went soft as cloth. Around her, the high desert sprawled in every direction, sagebrush and stone beneath a sky so big it made her chest ache. The train was late. 40 minutes late, according to the rusted clock hanging crooked above the ticket window. She'd worn her mother's dress, navy blue wool with ivory buttons, the only nice thing she owned that wasn't actively falling apart. Beneath it, her work boots were caked in yesterday's mud because she didn't own proper town shoes anymore. Hadn't for 2 years since the fever took her father and left her alone with 300 acres of stubborn earth and a mortgage that grew teeth every month. Train's coming. The station master, a wizened man named Polk who smelled perpetually of tobacco and regret, nodded toward the eastern horizon. Eliza followed his gaze and saw the black smudge of smoke pulling itself across the pale morning. Her stomach turned over. This was insane. She knew it was insane, marrying a man she'd never met, whose face she knew only from a single photograph that might have been 10 years old for all she could tell. But insanity had a price. Insanity cost more than she could pay. The bank had given her until December, 6 weeks. After that, the land her grandfather had broken his back to claim would go to auction, and she'd go somewhere. Nowhere. A woman alone with no family and no prospects didn't go anywhere good. So she'd written to the matrimonial agency in Carson City. She'd paid $3 she couldn't spare for them to forward her letter to men looking for wives in remote territories. And she'd received exactly one response. Dear Miss Carter, your letter intrigued me. I am 32 years old, of sound health and temperate habits. I have experience with livestock and dry farming. I seek a partnership built on mutual respect and honest labor. If you find these terms acceptable, I will arrive on the 4th of November. Respectfully, Thomas Mercer. The letter had been short, formal, almost stiff, but it hadn't been cruel or presumptuous. Thomas Mercer hadn't promised her romance. He hadn't made grand claims about his wealth or character. He'd offered work, respect, and his presence. At the time, it had seemed like enough. Now, watching the train grow larger against the mountains, Eliza wasn't sure what she'd been thinking. The locomotive screamed as it hit the brakes, metal shrieking against metal. Steam billowed across the platform in hot clouds that smelled of coal and grease. Eliza stepped back instinctively, her heart hammering against her ribs like it wanted out. Doors opened. Passengers emerged in 2s and 3s, a family with squalling children, a salesman with a heavy case, an older woman in an elaborate hat that seemed wildly impractical for the frontier. No Thomas Mercer. Eliza's throat tightened. She pulled the photograph from her pocket, studied it again. A man with a broad, pleasant face. Light hair, maybe. The image was faded, the details unclear. She scanned the thinning crowd. Still nothing. Then the last car opened and a man stepped down. Eliza knew immediately he wasn't Thomas Mercer. This man moved like violence contained in skin. Tall, lean, in the way of men who'd never had enough to eat and learned to make do. His coat was dark, dusty, cut long to hide what she suspected was a gun belt beneath. His hat shadowed most of his face, but what she could see was all hard angles, sharp jaw, a mouth set in something too grim to be called a frown. He carried a single bag and a rifle. When he turned, his eyes found her with the precision of a man who'd spent his life reading rooms for threats. Those eyes were gray, cold gray, like winter rivers. He walked toward her. No, Eliza heard herself say. Just that. A small, stupid word that changed nothing. The man stopped 3 feet away. Up close, she could see the scar that ran from his left temple into his hairline. Could see the way his right hand stayed loose, ready. Could see that he hadn't slept well in a very long time. Miss Eliza Carter? His voice was low, rough-edged, not unkind, but not soft either. "Who are you?" "Ronan Hale." He said it like she should know the name. When her expression didn't change, something that might have been relief flickered across his face. "Thomas Mercer sent me." The world tilted slightly. "Sent you?" "Yes, ma'am." "Where is he?" Ronan Hale looked at her for a long moment. Then he removed his hat, held it against his chest in a gesture that seemed both genuine and utterly foreign to him. "Thomas is dead, Miss Carter. I'm sorry." The words hit her like a physical blow. Eliza took a step back, her heel catching on the edge of a plank. She didn't fall, but it was close. "Dead," she repeated. "Yes, ma'am." "How?" "We were traveling together from Colorado. There was a situation. He took a bullet meant for someone else." Ronan's jaw worked. It was quick. He didn't suffer. Eliza's laugh came out strangled, nearly hysterical. "You expect me to believe that? That the man I was supposed to marry just died protecting a stranger?" "He wasn't protecting a stranger." Ronan's eyes didn't leave hers. "He was protecting me." The admission sat heavy between them. Around them, the station was emptying out. Families reuniting, businessmen flagging down wagons. Normal people doing normal things while Eliza's entire plan disintegrated into ash. "Why would he do that?" Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Because I asked him to come here. To marry you." Ronan shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "I knew Thomas from the war. Good man, honest. When I heard he was looking to settle down, I suggested he write to the agency. Told him about the opportunities out here. So this is your fault." "Yes, ma'am, it is." The bluntness of it caught her off guard. She'd expected excuses, justifications. Instead, Ronan Hale just stood there and took the accusation like he'd been taking them his whole life. Eliza pressed her palm to her forehead, trying to think through the ringing in her ears. "I don't understand why you're here. If Thomas is dead, why did you come all this way to tell me?" "Because he asked me to." Ronan reached into his coat, slowly, watching her reaction, and pulled out a folded paper. "He made me promise. If something happened to him, I was to come here and fulfill the arrangement." Eliza stared at the paper like it might bite her. "What arrangement?" "The marriage, Miss Carter. Thomas wanted you to have the protection you'd bargained for, so I came to offer it instead." For a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The absurdity of it crashed over her in waves. "You're insane." "Probably." "You think I'm going to marry you? A complete stranger who just admitted getting my actual fiancé killed? I think you wrote to that agency because you're desperate." Ronan's tone wasn't cruel, just factual. "I think whatever drove you to marry a man you'd never met hasn't changed in the last 10 minutes. And I think you're smart enough to know that moral outrage doesn't pay mortgages." Eliza's hand cracked across his face before she'd decided to move. The slap echoed across the platform. Ronan's head snapped to the side, but he didn't step back. Didn't raise a hand to his reddening cheek. He just absorbed it, then slowly turned back to face her. "I deserve that," he said quietly. "You deserve worse." Her voice shook. "You come here, tell me the one chance I had is dead, and then, what? Propose like you're doing me a favor? Like I should be grateful? No, ma'am. You shouldn't be grateful. You should be furious." Ronan's eyes held hers, and for the first time she saw something human in them, something raw. "But being furious won't save your land, won't get you through winter, won't keep the bank from taking everything your family built." "You don't know anything about my family." "I know enough. Thomas told me about your letter, about your father, the debt, the deadline." He paused. "I know you're alone and running out of time." Eliza wanted to hit him again, wanted to scream that he was wrong, that she had options, that she didn't need help from a man who carried death in his eyes and violence in his hands. But she couldn't, because every word he'd said was true. "What could you possibly gain from this?" she asked, hating how defeated she sounded. "Time," Ronan said simply. "Space. A place where people don't know my name or my face. I've been running for a long time, Miss Carter. I'm tired." "Running from what?" "Nothing you want attached to your life." He put his hat back on. "That's why I'm offering a different arrangement than Thomas would have. No real marriage, just a legal one. I'll work your land, fix what needs fixing, make sure you keep it through winter. In exchange, you give me a place to disappear for a while. 6 months, maybe less. Then I'll move on, and you can dissolve the marriage however you want. That's insane. You already said that. It bears repeating. Eliza looked away, out at the mountains that ringed the valley like prison walls. Even if I was crazy enough to consider this, why would I trust you? You admitted you lie. You use people. I don't lie, Ronan said, and there was an edge to it now. I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of, but I don't lie to women who don't deserve it. He was quiet for a moment. Thomas trusted me. That should count for something. Thomas is dead. Yes, ma'am. And I'm alive because he made a choice. Ronan's hand tightened on the strap of his bag. I owe him a debt. This is how I pay it. Eliza turned back to him, studied his face, tried to see past the scars and the hard edges to whatever was underneath. If I say no, then I'll get back on the next train and you'll never see me again. But you'll still be alone come December, and the bank doesn't give second chances. The wind picked up, throwing grit against her cheek. In the distance, she could see the road that led back to her ranch, 12 miles of ruts and rocks, every inch of it familiar, every inch of it hers, for 6 more weeks. I need to think, she said finally. Ronan nodded. Fair enough. When's the next train out? Day after tomorrow. Then I'll wait. He glanced around the emptying platform. Is there a hotel in town? There's a boarding house. Mrs. Chen, 2 blocks east. Eliza hesitated. It's not much. It's fine. Ronan shouldered his bag. I'll be there if you need to find me. And Miss Carter? She looked at him. I'm sorry. About Thomas, about all of it. I know that doesn't change anything, but it's true. He walked away before she could respond, his boots loud on the wooden planks. Eliza watched him go, this stranger who'd just upended her entire world, and tried to decide if she was relieved or terrified that he'd given her a choice. The ranch looked worse than she remembered. Eliza guided her mare down the rutted drive, taking in the sagging fence line, the barn door hanging crooked on broken hinges, the water pump that hadn't worked right since August. In her absence, barely half a day, the place seemed to have aged years, or maybe she was just seeing it clearly for the first time. The house was small, built from local timber and more hope than skill. Her grandfather had constructed it with his own hands in 1867, and it showed. The roof leaked in 3 places. The porch steps were more gap than wood. The windows didn't quite fit their frames, which meant every wind brought dust straight through into the kitchen. But it was hers. She'd been born in the bedroom off the kitchen, had learned to walk on these warped floors, learned to read by the light of that crooked window. Her mother had died in the front room, the fever taking her slowly while Eliza held her hand and promised to be strong. Her father had taught her to shoot in the yard where the chickens now pecked at frozen ground. A woman alone needs to be harder than the men who'd take advantage, he'd said, pressing the old rifle into her 12-year-old hands. Don't ever forget that. She hadn't. Eliza unsaddled the mare, brushed her down, made sure she had water and the last of the decent hay. Then she stood in the barn, her father's barn, her grandfather's barn, and let herself admit the truth. She was losing. The mortgage was $600. She had $73 and change in a coffee tin under her bed. The autumn harvest had been poor, the cattle prices worse. She'd sold everything that wasn't nailed down, her mother's jewelry, her father's watch, every stick of furniture that wasn't essential. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Without Thomas Mercer, without the extra labor and capital a husband represented, she was finished. And now Thomas Mercer was dead, and in his place stood Ronan Hale, a man with a gun and secrets, a man who admitted he was running, a man who'd gotten her fiancé killed and had the audacity to offer himself as replacement. The smart thing would be to refuse, to thank him for coming all this way and send him back where he'd come from. Maybe she could find someone in town willing to help. Maybe she could convince the bank to extend her deadline. Maybe she could grow wings and fly. Damn, Eliza said softly to the empty barn. Then louder, angrier. Damn it! She kicked a support post which accomplished nothing except making her toe throb. The chickens outside clucked disapprovingly. Her father would have known what to do. He always knew what to do, until the fever took that certainty along with everything else. In his last days, when the delirium set in, he'd gripped her hand and made her promise to keep the land. Don't let them take it, Eliza. Don't let everything we built disappear. She'd promised. And now a stranger with winter eyes and blood on his conscience was offering her a way to keep that promise. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table with her father's ledger, going through the numbers for the 100th time, looking for a miracle in the columns, some error that would transform $73 into $600. The miracle didn't come. By dawn, she'd made her decision. Ronan was sitting on the porch of Mrs. Chen's boarding house when Eliza arrived, looking like he'd been expecting her. He stood as she dismounted, his expression carefully neutral. "Miss Carter." "I have conditions," Eliza said without preamble. Something shifted in his eyes. Not quite relief, but close. "I'm listening. This is a business arrangement, nothing more. You'll sleep in the barn, take your meals separately, and we'll maintain appearances in town, but that's it. You don't come into my house unless invited. You don't touch my things. You don't ask about my family or my past." Ronan nodded slowly. "Understood. I need your labor until spring. That gives me time to make next year's payments and find a real solution. In exchange, you can hide from whatever you're running from. But the moment you bring trouble to my door, the deal is off and you leave. Immediately. No argument." "Fair enough. And one more thing." Eliza met his eyes, made sure he understood this wasn't negotiable. "If you hurt me, if you lay a hand on me in anger or anything else, I will shoot you. I'm a good shot. My father made sure of that. Do you understand?" For the first time, Ronan's expression softened slightly. "Yes, ma'am, I understand. And I give you my word, whatever that's worth to you, that I won't hurt you, won't touch you. You set the boundaries, and I'll respect them." Eliza wanted to believe him, wanted to see honor in those cold eyes, but trust wasn't something she could afford right now. "There's a church in town," she said. "We'll need to make this legal." "When?" "Today, before I lose my nerve, Sab." The ceremony took 11 minutes. Pastor Williams asked twice if she was certain. Eliza said yes both times, her voice steady even as her hands shook. Ronan stood beside her in his dusty coat, his hat in his hands, and spoke his vows in that low, rough voice that gave away nothing. Mrs. Chen and Old Polk served as witnesses. Neither asked questions, which Eliza appreciated. Small towns thrived on gossip, but sometimes survival trumped scandal. When it was done, when Pastor Williams pronounced them married under the law in the eyes of the community, Ronan didn't try to kiss her. He just offered his hand, formal and distant. Eliza shook it. His palm was calloused, scarred, the hand of a man who'd worked hard and fought harder. "Thank you," he said quietly, for her ears only. Eliza didn't respond. Couldn't, because she'd just married a stranger to save her land, and the full weight of that decision was settling onto her shoulders like stone. The ride back to the ranch was silent. Ronan followed on a rented horse, keeping a respectful distance. He didn't try to make conversation, didn't ask questions, just rode with the easy competence of someone who'd spent a lot of time in the saddle. When they reached the ranch, Eliza dismounted and gestured toward the barn. "You can set up in there. There's a stall in the back that's clean enough. I'll bring you blankets and—" "I have what I need," Ronan interrupted gently. "Don't trouble yourself. There's a pump by the house for water. Outhouse is past the chicken coop. Breakfast is at dawn, dinner at dusk. You'll eat on the porch unless the weather's bad." "Understood." Eliza started toward the house, then stopped, turned back. Ronan was still standing by his horse, watching her with those unreadable eyes. "Why?" she asked. "Really? Why did you come all this way to marry a woman you don't know?" Ronan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it. "Because Thomas was a good man, and good men are rare. When they die protecting you, you owe them, simple as that." "Nothing about this is simple." "No, ma'am, it's not." He turned toward the barn. "But sometimes complicated is all we get, Nas." That first week passed in wary silence. Ronan worked like a man possessed. He fixed the barn door, reinforced the fence, cleared the irrigation ditch that had clogged with debris. He didn't ask for instruction, just assessed what needed doing and did it. When Eliza checked his work, she found it solid, competent, the work of someone who knew his way around a ranch. He kept to their agreement, slept in the barn, ate his meals alone, spoke only when necessary. In the evenings, she'd see him sitting on an overturned crate outside the barn, cleaning his rifle or mending tack by lamplight. He never came to the house unless she called him. The townspeople naturally had opinions. Mrs. Chen mentioned during Sunday services that it was unusual for a new bride to keep her husband in the barn. Mr. Polk asked, with the bluntness of the very old, if everything was all right at home. Even Pastor Williams pulled her aside to ask if she needed counsel. "We have an understanding," Eliza told them all, which was true if incomplete. What she didn't tell them was that having Ronan there, silent and distant as he was, made her feel safer than she had in years. That knowing someone else was sharing the burden of keeping this place running meant she slept more than 4 hours for the first time since her father died. She didn't tell them because she barely admitted it to herself. The trouble started on a Tuesday. Eliza was in town buying supplies when she noticed the men. 3 of them, strangers, standing outside the general store like they owned the place. They watched her with the kind of attention that made her skin crawl. The oldest one, dark-haired with a scar bisecting his eyebrow, smiled when she tried to pass. "Afternoon, ma'am. You wouldn't happen to know a man named Ronan Hale, would you?" Eliza's blood went cold. "Why?" "Old friends looking to reconnect." His smile didn't reach his eyes. Heard he might have passed through. "Don't know anyone by that name," Eliza lied, proud that her voice stayed steady. "That's funny, 'cause we heard he got himself married to a lady rancher about a week back." The man stepped closer, and Eliza smelled whiskey on his breath. "You wouldn't be lying to us, would you, Mrs. Hale?" The name hit her like a fist. She'd kept her own name legally, but apparently word had spread about the marriage. "I said I don't know him. Now get out of my way." "Can't do that, ma'am. See, Ronan's got something that belongs to our employer. We're just here to collect." "Then you can ask him yourself when you find him," Eliza snapped. "But you won't find him on my land, and if you try, I'll shoot you for trespassing." She pushed past him before he could respond, her heart hammering. Behind her, she heard one of the other men laugh, low and mean. Feisty. Ronan always did like them feisty. Eliza kept walking, her hand tight on the shopping list in her pocket. She didn't run, didn't look back, but every instinct screamed that she'd just made a terrible mistake. She found Ronan in the barn, shoeing one of the horses. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. He looked up, saw her face, and set down the hoof. "What happened?" "3 men in town, looking for you. They knew about the marriage." Ronan's expression didn't change, but something went very still in him. "What did they look like?" Eliza described them. The scar, the whiskey smell, the casual menace. "Damn," Ronan said quietly. He straightened, wiping his hands on his trousers. "I'm sorry, Miss Carter. I'd hoped I had more time." "Time before what? Who are those men?" "Men I worked for, a long time ago." He met her eyes. "Men I stole from when I left." The world tilted. "You're a thief." "Was, and not from people who didn't deserve it." Ronan moved to the barn door, scanning the horizon like he expected an attack at any moment. "I can leave. Right now. That'll keep them away from here." "They already know about me," Eliza said, anger rising. "You brought this here, and now running won't fix it." "Then what do you want me to do?" It was a genuine question, not defensive, not dismissive. He was asking her, the woman he'd dragged into this, what she wanted. Eliza thought about her father's rifle, about the promise she'd made, about the fact that men like these would destroy her ranch looking for Ronan whether he was here or not. "How dangerous are they?" "Very. Can you fight them?" Ronan hesitated. "I can try. But there's more where these came from. My old employer doesn't forgive debts." "Then we need to make sure there's nothing left to forgive," Eliza said, surprising herself. "You said you stole something. What?" "Evidence. Ledgers documenting crimes he'd rather stay buried." Ronan's jaw tightened. "I sent them to a federal marshal I trust. They should reach him in a few weeks. Once they do, my old employer will have bigger problems than me. So we just need to survive a few weeks." "Against men who kill for a living." Ronan shook his head. "Miss Carter, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but—" "This is my land," Eliza interrupted. "My home. I'm not running from it, and I'm not letting them destroy it because of you." She stepped closer, made sure he was listening. "You want to pay your debt to Thomas? Then help me defend what's mine." For a long moment, Ronan just looked at her. Then, slowly, he nodded. "All right," he said. "But we do this smart, and you follow my lead on security. This is still my ranch. Understood. But I know how these men think, how they operate. If we're going to survive this, you need to trust me. Trust. That word again. Eliza wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Trusting a man she'd known for a week. A man who'd just admitted he was running from criminals. A man who'd married her to escape his past. But what choice did she have? Fine, she said. What do we do first? Ronan looked around the barn, his expression shifting into something cold and tactical. First, we make this place a lot harder to attack. Then we prepare for the worst. They worked through the night. Ronan showed her where to position rifles for the best coverage, helped her reinforce the windows with boards that could be kicked out for firing positions, checked the ammunition supply and grimly noted they didn't have enough. We'll need to make every shot count, he said, loading his own rifle with practiced efficiency. Eliza watched him move, smooth, methodical, like violence was a language he spoke fluently. She should have been terrified. Maybe she was. But beneath the fear was something else. Determination. These men wanted to take something from her. Her safety, her home, maybe her life. They thought she'd fold because she was a woman alone. They thought wrong. Ronan, she said as he checked the barn's sight lines, when this is over, assuming we survive, I want the truth. All of it. Who you really are, what you did, why those men want you dead. He paused, then nodded. Fair enough. And then you leave. That was our deal. Yes, ma'am. Eliza returned to the house, her arms full of ammunition. Through the window, she could see Ronan in the yard, his silhouette dark against the rising moon. She'd married a stranger to save her land. Now that stranger might be the only thing standing between her and destruction. The irony wasn't lost on her. But as she loaded her father's rifle and checked the sight, Eliza Carter made herself a new promise. Whatever came next, she'd face it standing. No running, no surrender. They wanted a fight? She'd give them one they'd remember. The attack came 3 days later, but not the way Eliza expected. She was feeding the chickens when she heard the scream, high and sharp, coming from the direction of the Taylor place, 2 miles east. The bucket slipped from her hands, scattering grain across the frozen ground. She ran for the house, grabbing her rifle from where it leaned against the porch rail. Ronan was already moving, emerging from the barn with his gun belt strapped on and his expression grim. Stay here, he said. Like hell. Eliza checked her rifle's chamber. The Taylors have 3 children, which is exactly why you should stay. If this is what I think it is. Another scream cut him off. Then smoke, black and ugly, rising above the tree line. They rode hard, Ronan slightly ahead, his body tense in the saddle. The closer they got, the more Eliza's stomach twisted. She could smell it now, burning wood, something worse underneath. The Taylor homestead was small, newer than hers, built by a young couple who'd come west with more optimism than sense. Daniel Taylor worked in town 3 days a week while his wife, Sarah, managed their modest farm and watched their children. When Eliza and Ronan crested the ridge, they saw what was left. The barn was fully engulfed, flames licking at the gray sky. The house looked intact, but the front door hung open, splintered. In the yard, Daniel Taylor lay face down in the dirt, blood pooling beneath him. Sarah knelt beside him, screaming his name over and over, while her children huddled behind her, crying. Ronan pulled his horse up short, his hand dropping to his gun. His eyes scanned the perimeter with the intensity of a man expecting an ambush. They're gone, he said quietly. This was a message. Eliza didn't wait for permission. She dismounted and ran to Sarah, who looked up with wild, tear-streaked eyes. Help him, Sarah begged. Please, he can't. But Daniel Taylor was already dead. Eliza could see that in the way his body lay, the stillness that came after. She knelt anyway, pressed her fingers to his throat, felt nothing. I'm sorry, she whispered. Sarah's scream turned into something worse, a keening wail that spoke of a future collapsing, of children left fatherless, and a woman left alone. Eliza wrapped her arms around her, held her while she shook, while the children cried and the barn burned and Ronan stood watch with his rifle ready. What happened? Ronan asked when Sarah could speak. 3 men, she gasped between sobs. They came looking for someone, asked about a Ronan Hale. Daniel said he didn't know anyone by that name, and her voice broke. They said it was a reminder that people who lie get hurt. Then one of them shot Daniel, and they set the barn on fire and rode off laughing. Eliza felt ice spread through her chest. She looked at Ronan, saw the muscle jumping in his jaw, the way his knuckles had gone white on the rifle. "Get them to town," he said, his voice flat. "The boarding house. Mrs. Chen will take them in." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done 3 days ago." He turned toward his horse. "I'm leaving. Tonight. That'll draw them away from here." "No." Eliza stood, still holding Sarah. "You leave and they'll keep hurting people just to prove they can. We end this. Together." "Miss Carter, Daniel Taylor died because of you, but he'll have died for nothing if we run." Eliza's voice shook but held. "You said you'd help me defend my home. That includes defending my neighbors." Ronan looked at her for a long moment, something complicated moving behind his eyes. Then he nodded once, sharp. "Help me get them loaded up," he said. They took Sarah and the children to town in the wagon, the oldest girl, maybe 7, clutching a rag doll and staring at nothing. Daniel's body they wrapped in canvas and laid in the bed, covered with blankets. The whole ride, Sarah didn't speak, just sat with her youngest in her lap, rocking slowly. When they reached town, people came out to stare. News traveled fast in small communities, and tragedy faster. Mrs. Chen took one look at Sarah's face and ushered the family inside without questions. Pastor Williams appeared to help with Daniel's body, his expression grave. "This isn't over," he told Eliza quietly. "Whatever brought this to our town, it needs to leave." "I know," Eliza said. "I'm working on it." On the ride back, Ronan was silent until they were halfway home. Then he spoke without looking at her. "You should hate me." "I do," Eliza said honestly, "but hating you won't bring Daniel back, won't protect the next person they decide to hurt. So what do you want to do?" Eliza thought about Sarah's screams, about 3 children who'd watched their father die, about her own father, the promise she'd made, the land that was worth fighting for. "I want to make them bleed," she said. Ronan glanced at her, something almost like approval in his expression. "That can be arranged." When they got back to the ranch, he didn't return to the barn. Instead, he followed Eliza into the house, the first time he'd crossed that threshold since their wedding. She poured coffee while he spread a map on her kitchen table, marking positions with a stub of pencil. "They'll come for us next," he said. "Tonight, tomorrow, soon. They want me scared, want me running. When I don't, they'll escalate." "How many?" "Could be 3, could be a dozen. Depends on how much my old employer wants me dead." Ronan tapped the map. "Your ranch sits in a valley. Good for farming, terrible for defense. They can approach from 3 directions and we can't cover them all. So we pick one direction and make it count. Or we don't wait for them to pick." Ronan looked up, his gray eyes hard. "We could set a trap. Make them think you're alone, vulnerable. When they come, I hit them from behind. Using me as bait." "Yes." Eliza should have refused. Should have told him to go to hell for even suggesting it. But she'd already made her choice back at the Taylor place when she decided that running wasn't an option. "What would I need to do?" Ronan outlined the plan. It was simple, brutal, and depended on Eliza being willing to put herself in the line of fire. She'd make a show of going to town, complaining loudly about her absent husband who'd abandoned her. Let the gossip spread, then return home after dark, alone, lights on in the house like she wasn't expecting trouble. The men would see an easy target. A woman alone, no protection, ripe for the taking. They'd approach confident, careless, and Ronan would be waiting. "What if they don't fall for it?" Eliza asked. "Then we try something else. But men like these, they underestimate women. It's their weakness." He paused. "Thomas told me you're a good shot. Is that true?" "Yes." "Good enough to shoot a man?" Eliza thought about her father's lessons, the way he'd made her practice until her shoulder ached, until she could hit a bottle at 100 yards. He'd never said it directly, but she'd understood. Someday she might need to shoot something besides bottles. "If I have to," she said. "You'll have to." Ronan's voice was matter-of-fact. "When it starts, there's no hesitation. You see a target, you shoot. They won't show you mercy for being a woman." "I understand." "Do you?" He leaned forward. "I've killed men, Miss Carter. More than I can count, more than I care to remember. It changes you, stays with you. You sure you want that weight?" Eliza met his eyes. Daniel Taylor is dead because I married you. His children don't have a father because I needed help, and you brought hell to my doorstep. So yes, I'm sure. I'll carry that weight. But so will you. Something flickered across Ronan's face. Guilt, maybe, or respect. He nodded slowly. Tomorrow, then. We set the trap. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the windows. Somewhere outside, Ronan was keeping watch. She wondered if he slept at all, or if men like him ever really rested. She thought about Sarah Taylor, now a widow. About those 3 children who'd have to grow up without their father's protection. About her own father, the way he'd looked at her in his final days, proud and terrified in equal measure. "Don't let them take it," he'd whispered, his hand burning with fever in hers. "Promise me, Eliza." She'd promised, and tomorrow she'd keep that promise, whatever it cost. The next morning, Eliza dressed carefully. Not in her work clothes, but in her town dress, the one that made her look softer, younger, less capable. She braided her hair, left her rifle behind, but tucked a small pistol into her coat pocket. Ronan watched her prepare with an unreadable expression. "You don't have to do this," he said. "Yes, I do. If something goes wrong, then you make sure they don't walk away from it." Eliza checked the pistol's chamber. "That's the deal." She rode to town slowly, making sure anyone watching would see her. At the general store, she made a point of complaining to Mrs. Chen about her husband, how he'd promised to help, how he'd been distant and strange, how she was starting to regret the whole arrangement. Mrs. Chen listened with the avid attention of someone already composing the gossip she'd spread later. "Men," she said sympathetically, "never what they promise, are they?" "No," Eliza agreed, playing the role. "They're not." She bought supplies she didn't need, spent money she couldn't spare, and made sure to mention she'd be alone at the ranch for the next few days. Her husband had business elsewhere. She was frightened, honestly, being so isolated without protection. By the time she left, half the town would know. And half the town meant the wrong ears would hear within hours. The ride home felt longer than usual. Eliza kept her hand near the pistol, her eyes scanning the horizon. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every bird taking flight made her jump. She was afraid. She could admit that to herself. But fear didn't mean paralysis. Her father had taught her that too. When she reached the ranch, the sun was setting. The house looked exactly as she'd left it, small, weathered, hers. She unsaddled her horse, gave her water, then went inside and lit every lamp she owned. The light would make her visible, would announce she was home, alone, unprepared. Ronan was somewhere out there in the darkness. She had to trust he was in position, ready. Had to trust that this plan, insane as it was, would work. She made coffee she didn't drink. Sat at the kitchen table with a book she couldn't read. Waited. The first hour passed in silence. The second hour, she heard coyotes in the distance. The third hour, her nerves were screaming. Then the dogs started barking. Eliza stood, her hand going to the pistol. Through the window, she saw nothing. But the dogs knew. They always knew. A floorboard creaked on the porch. She turned toward the door just as it crashed open, the lock giving way under a heavy boot. 3 men poured in. The same 3 from town, the scarred one in front. "Evening, Mrs. Hale," he said, smiling. "Hope we're not interrupting." Eliza raised the pistol, her hand steady despite her racing heart. "Get out of my house." "Or what? You'll shoot us?" The man laughed. "Sweetheart, if you were going to shoot, you'd have done it already." He was right. She should have fired the moment they came through the door. But her finger froze on the trigger, some deep instinct screaming that crossing this line meant never going back. The hesitation cost her. One of the other men lunged forward, faster than she expected. His hand closed around her wrist, twisting hard. The pistol clattered to the floor. Eliza screamed, not from fear but from rage, and drove her knee into his groin. He doubled over with the grunt. She grabbed for the pistol, but the scarred man got there first, kicking it away. "Feisty," he said, grabbing her by the hair. I like that. Makes it more fun." Eliza spat in his face. He hit her, open palm across the cheek, hard enough to snap her head to the side and fill her mouth with blood. Stars burst behind her eyes. "Where is he?" the man demanded, shaking her. "Where's Ronan?" "Gone," Eliza gasped. "He left. Days ago." "Liar." Another shake. We know he's here, hiding like the coward he is. I don't know where. The window exploded inward. Glass showered across the room as Ronan came through in a roll, his rifle already firing. The first shot took the man holding Eliza in the shoulder, spinning him away. The second caught the one she'd kneed in the chest, dropping him like a stone. The scarred man dove for cover behind the table, drawing his own gun. Ronan fired again but missed, the bullet splintering wood. Then everything dissolved into chaos. Gunfire filled the small house, deafening. Eliza threw herself flat as bullets tore through walls, shattered dishes, ripped through furniture. The acrid smell of gunpowder burned her nose. She saw Ronan move like smoke, using the furniture for cover, his face cold and focused. Saw the scarred man fire wild, panic replacing his earlier confidence. Saw the wounded man crawling toward the door, leaving a trail of blood. Her pistol was 3 feet away. Eliza lunged for it, her fingers closing around the grip just as the scarred man spotted her. He swung his gun toward her, and time seemed to slow. She saw his finger tighten on the trigger, saw the barrel line up with her chest. She fired first. The recoil jolted her arm. The bullet caught him in the throat, and he went down choking, his gun clattering away. For a moment there was only the sound of harsh breathing. Then Ronan was beside her, pulling her to her feet, checking her for wounds. "Are you hit?" "No." Her voice sounded strange, distant. "I don't think so." The room looked like a war zone. 2 bodies lay still. The third, the one she'd shot in the throat, was making horrible wet sounds as he died. Ronan walked over, looked down at him without expression. "Where's the rest of your crew?" he asked. The man tried to speak, blood bubbling from his lips. Ronan knelt, leaning closer. "How many more?" "Go." "To hell," the man wheezed. "Already there." Ronan stood. "You first." He walked away as the man died, his attention already moving to the windows, checking for more threats. Eliza stood frozen, staring at the body, at the hole she'd put in his throat, at the blood spreading across her kitchen floor. She'd killed a man. The thought kept circling, not quite real. She'd fired her father's rifle at bottles, at targets, at coyotes threatening the chickens. But never at a person. Never watched the light go out of someone's eyes because of her. "Eliza." Ronan's voice cut through the fog. "I need you focused. This isn't over. There's more, always more." These were just the advance team. He reloaded his rifle with quick, practiced movements. "They'll have others watching, waiting to see if we survived. When these 3 don't report back, they'll escalate." Eliza's legs felt unsteady. She sat down hard on the one chair that wasn't destroyed, her hands shaking. "I killed him," she said. "You defended yourself." Ronan moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. "You did what had to be done." "That's supposed to make it better?" "No, it's just supposed to be true." He glanced back at her. "First kill is always hardest. You want to fall apart, that's your right, but do it later. Right now we need to move." "Move where?" "Somewhere they can't trap us. Somewhere we can see them coming." Ronan crossed to her, crouched so they were eye level. "Listen to me. You did good tonight. Better than most men I've fought beside. But this is only the beginning. If you want to quit, if you want to take what's left of your things and run, I won't blame you." Eliza looked around her house. Her mother's kitchen, now blood-stained and bullet-riddled. Her father's table, split down the middle. Everything familiar made strange by violence. She thought about Sarah Taylor, about Daniel's body wrapped in canvas, about the promise she'd made. "How do we win?" she asked. "We don't. Not against what's coming." Ronan stood. "But we can survive long enough for those ledgers to reach the marshal. Once they do, my old employer becomes a wanted man. He'll have bigger problems than me." "How long?" "Week, maybe 2. Then we hold for 2 weeks." Eliza forced herself to stand, to ignore the trembling in her legs. "What do we need?" Ronan studied her face, and for the first time, something like admiration crossed his features. "Supplies, ammunition, and people." "People? You think we can hold this place alone?" He gestured to the carnage. "This was 3 men. Next time it'll be 10, maybe more. We need help." "Who's going to help us? We brought this fight to their doorstep." "Then we make them understand that if we fall, they're next." Ronan moved to the door, checking the yard. "These men don't stop at one target. They'll burn through this whole town looking for me. The only way anyone survives is if we stand together. Eliza thought about the pastor's words, about Mrs. Chen's suspicious glances, about a community that had never fully trusted her, even before she'd married a stranger. They won't listen, she said. They might, if the right person asks. Ronan looked at her. You were born here. Your family built this place. People respect that, even if they don't respect me. You want me to convince them to fight. I want you to convince them that fighting is the only way they survive. It was insane, asking farmers and shopkeepers to take up arms against professional killers. But Ronan was right about one thing. If they did nothing, more people would die. More wives would become widows. More children would lose fathers. Tomorrow, Eliza said. I'll talk to them tomorrow. Good. Ronan grabbed his bag from where he'd stashed it near the door. Tonight we sleep somewhere else. They might come back, and I'd rather not fight in a building with no defensible positions. Where? The barn has good sight lines. We can see anyone approaching. He paused. Unless you'd rather ride to town. No. Eliza grabbed her rifle, checked the chamber. We stay. This is my land. They spent the night in the hayloft, taking turns on watch. When it was Eliza's turn, she sat with her rifle across her knees and watched the darkness beyond the barn doors. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow looked like a threat. Ronan slept fitfully in the hay, his hand never far from his gun. Even in sleep, he looked ready to fight. As dawn broke gray and cold, Eliza made her decision. She'd go to town. She'd talk to the people she'd known her whole life, and she'd make them understand that survival meant standing together, even if that meant standing with the man who'd brought death to their door. Because the alternative, waiting alone for the next attack, wasn't survival at all. It was just dying slowly. The town meeting hall smelled like old wood and suspicion. Eliza stood at the front, her hands gripping the edge of the podium to hide their shaking. 23 people had shown up. Less than half the town's population, but more than she'd expected. They sat in scattered groups, farmers beside shopkeepers beside the few ranchers who'd bothered to come. Sarah Taylor was there too, in the back, her face hollow. Pastor Williams stood near the door, arms crossed. Mr. Polk sat in the front row, whittling a piece of wood with methodical strokes. Mrs. Chen perched on the edge of her seat, eyes sharp with judgment. Ronan wasn't there. They'd agreed it was better if he stayed away. His presence would only inflame things. But Eliza felt his absence like a missing limb. "Thank you for coming," she started, and her voice came out smaller than she wanted. She cleared her throat, tried again. "I know some of you think I shouldn't have called this meeting, that what happened to the Taylors and to my ranch isn't your concern." "Damn right it's not," someone muttered. She couldn't see who. "But you're wrong." Eliza forced herself to meet their eyes, one by one. "The men who killed Daniel Taylor didn't come here for him. They came looking for my husband, and when they didn't find what they wanted, they hurt innocent people to send a message." "Then give them your husband," Mrs. Chen said sharply. "Let him face his own consequences." "I would if it would end there." Eliza's hands tightened on the podium. "But it won't. These men don't stop. They'll tear through this town looking for him, and they won't care who gets in the way. Your homes, your families, none of it matters to them." "So what are you proposing?" Pastor Williams asked quietly. "That we fight? Most of us aren't gunmen, Eliza. We're farmers, tradesmen. We came here to build lives, not wage war." "I know, but sometimes war finds you anyway." She paused, gathering her words. "My husband has something these men want. Evidence of crimes their employer committed. He sent it to a federal marshal. In a week, maybe 2, it'll reach him. When it does, these men will have bigger problems than us." 2 weeks. Old Polk stopped whittling, looked up. "You're asking us to hold out for 2 weeks against professional killers." "I'm asking you to defend your homes, your families." Eliza's voice strengthened. "Because whether you help us or not, they're coming. And when they do you really think they'll leave witnesses? That they'll stop at one ranch, one family?" The room fell silent. She could see the calculation happening behind their eyes, the weighing of risks, the measure of fear against anger. "You brought this here," a voice said from the middle. It was James Wright, a rancher whose land bordered hers to the south. "You married a stranger, didn't ask questions, and now you want us to pay the price." "You're right," Eliza said, and the admission seemed to surprise him. I did bring this here. I was desperate and I made a choice without thinking through all the consequences. Daniel Taylor is dead because of that choice. His children don't have a father because I needed help, and I didn't care enough about where it came from. She took a breath, felt the weight of their stares. But you know what? I'd make the same choice again, because the alternative was losing my land, losing everything my family built. And I wasn't going to let that happen without a fight. Her voice rose. So yes, I brought this fight to your door, and I'm not apologizing for surviving, but I am asking you to help me finish it. Why should we trust you? Mrs. Chen demanded. Or that man you married. How do we know he's telling the truth about these ledgers? You don't, Ronan said. Everyone turned. He stood in the doorway, his coat dusty from the ride, his rifle slung over his shoulder. Eliza's stomach dropped. They'd agreed he'd stay away. Ronan, she's right not to trust me, he continued, walking down the center aisle. People shifted away from him like he carried disease. I've done things most of you couldn't stomach. Worked for men who'd kill you for the coins in your pocket. I've lied, stolen, and worse. He reached the front, stood beside Eliza. She could feel the tension radiating off him. But here's what I won't do, Ronan said, his voice carrying. I won't run. Not from this. My old employer is a man named Cyrus Taggart. He runs guns, extorts businesses, kills anyone who crosses him. For 5 years, I helped him do it. Kept his books, moved his money, made sure his operation ran smooth. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Eliza stared at him. He'd never told her the name, never given her details. Then I saw him murder a family, Ronan continued, his jaw tight. Father, mother, 2 kids. They'd refused to sell their land, and Cyrus doesn't take no for an answer. He had them lined up in their own yard and shot them like dogs. The youngest was 6. The room was dead silent. I took his ledgers that night. Every transaction, every crime, every name. Sent them to a marshal I served with during the war, a man I know is honest. But Cyrus has people everywhere, and the mail moves slow out here. So yes, maybe those ledgers are already in federal hands. Or maybe they're not. Either way, Cyrus thinks I still have them, which means he'll keep coming. Then you should leave, James Wright said. Take your trouble somewhere else. Can't do that. Ronan met his eyes. Because I owe a debt to Thomas Mercer, the man who died in my place. And I owe one to Eliza, who took me in when she had every reason not to. So I'm staying, I'm fighting, and yeah, I'm asking you to help. Not because you owe me anything, you don't. But because if we don't stand together, we fall separately. Pastor Williams stood. How many men are we talking about? Could be 10, could be 20. Depends on how much Cyrus is willing to spend. Ronan's expression didn't change. But they'll come hard. They'll come at night, and they'll try to burn you out or shoot you down, whichever's easier. And you think we can stop them? The pastor's voice was skeptical but not dismissive. I think we can make them bleed enough that Cyrus decides we're not worth the cost. Ronan glanced at Eliza, then back to the crowd. Your ranches are spread out, hard to defend individually, but if we consolidate, bring your families to one location, fortify it, create overlapping fields of fire, we can hold. Where? Old Polk asked. The Carter Ranch, Ronan said. It sits in a valley with good sight lines. The house and barn create natural strong points. We can turn it into something defensible. Eliza's throat tightened. Her ranch, her home, the place she'd been trying to save was now being offered up as a battlefield. And after? Mrs. Chen's voice cut through. After these 2 weeks? You expect us to just go back to normal? Trust you to keep your word and leave? I don't expect anything, Ronan said flatly. But I'll give you my word anyway. When this is done, when Cyrus is in custody or dead, I'll leave. You'll never see me again. Eliza can dissolve the marriage, tell everyone I abandoned her, whatever story saves her reputation. I don't care. I just want to finish this without more people like Daniel Taylor dying. The room erupted in conversation, arguments, questions, fear mixing with anger. Eliza let them talk, her mind racing. She hadn't expected Ronan to reveal so much, hadn't expected him to offer himself up for judgment. Finally, Pastor Williams raised his hand for quiet. I want to talk to Eliza. Alone. The crowd murmured but slowly filed out, shooting dark looks at Ronan as they passed. When the room emptied, only the pastor, Eliza, and Ronan remained. You're asking us to risk everything, Williams said. Our families, our homes, based on the word of a man who admits he's a criminal. I know, Eliza said. Do you? Because once we make this choice, there's no going back. People will die. Maybe us, maybe our children. And for what? To buy time for ledgers that might not even exist? They exist, Ronan said quietly. I swear it. Your oath means nothing to me. The pastor turned to Eliza. But yours does. You've lived here your whole life. Your family helped build this town. So I'm asking you, Eliza Carter, is this man worth dying for? The question hung in the air. Eliza thought about Thomas Mercer, dead in Ronan's place, about Daniel Taylor, dead for refusing to betray a stranger, about all the ways this could end badly and the few ways it might end right. No, she said finally. He's not worth dying for. But what he's trying to stop is, if we let Cyrus Taggart win, if we let men like him take what they want through violence, then what are we building here? What kind of town are we leaving our children? Williams was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed, and Eliza saw how tired he looked, how old. I'll need to talk to the others, he said. Put it to a vote. But Eliza, if they say no, then I fight alone, she interrupted. This is still my land. I'm not abandoning it. The pastor nodded, unsurprised. He left without another word, the door closing softly behind him. Ronan and Eliza stood in the empty hall, the silence heavy. You shouldn't have come, she said. Probably not. Why did you tell them everything? You could have lied, made yourself sound better. I'm done lying. Ronan moved to the window, looked out at the town. These people deserve to know what they're getting into, who they're fighting for. You mean who they're fighting with? Eliza joined him at the window. We're in this together now, whether I like it or not. Do you? Like it? She considered the question honestly. No, I hate that you brought this here. Hate that good people are suffering because of choices you made years ago. Hate that I have to ask my neighbors to risk their lives. But I don't hate you. The admission surprised her. I should. But when I look at you, all I see is someone trying to fix something broken. Maybe it's too late. Maybe it can't be fixed, but at least you're trying. Ronan didn't respond, but something in his expression shifted. Less guarded, more raw. They stood there as the afternoon light slanted through the dusty windows, two people bound by circumstance and desperation, waiting to see if their community would stand with them or leave them to burn. The vote came that evening. 13 voted to fight. 10 voted to stay neutral. 3 families packed up and left town entirely that night. It was enough. Pastor Williams organized the families who'd agreed to help. They'd moved to the Carter Ranch at dawn, bringing supplies, weapons, and whatever courage they could muster. The men who could shoot would form a perimeter. The women and children would stay in the house, ready to reload weapons or retreat to the root cellar if things went bad. Ronan spent the night turning the ranch into a fortress. He showed the men where to dig trenches, how to create barricades from wagons and lumber, taught them to shoot from cover, to conserve ammunition, to watch their sight lines. Most of them had never fired at anything but game. Ronan's instructions were blunt, practical, stripped of any romance. Aim for center mass. Don't try for headshots. You'll miss. When you shoot a man, he might not drop right away. Keep shooting until he does. And if they get close, if they breach the perimeter, don't hesitate. They won't. Eliza watched from the porch, helping Mrs. Chen and the other women organize medical supplies. Bandages, whiskey for sterilization, thread for stitching wounds. The preparations for violence, domestic and terrible. Sarah Taylor worked beside her in silence, her hands moving mechanically. She hadn't spoken since arriving. Sarah, Eliza said quietly, you don't have to be here. You could take the children and go where? Sarah's voice was flat. Daniel's dead. The farm's burned. I've got nothing but debts and 3 mouths to feed. At least here I can be useful. I'm sorry. Don't. Sarah finally looked at her, eyes red but dry. Don't apologize. Daniel made his choice when he lied to those men. He knew the risk. We both did. She paused. But I'll be damned if his death means nothing. So I'm staying. I'm helping. And when this is over, I'm going to make sure everyone remembers he died protecting strangers. Eliza couldn't find words. She just nodded, and they went back to work. As night fell, the ranch transformed. Families huddled in the house, speaking in whispers. Men rotated watch shifts, nervous hands on unfamiliar rifles. Children slept fitfully in corners, too young to understand but old enough to feel the fear. Ronan moved through it all like a shadow, checking positions, offering quiet words of instruction. He didn't sleep, didn't seem to need to. Eliza found him an hour before dawn, standing watch on the ridge overlooking the valley. The sky was just beginning to lighten in the east, stars fading. "You should rest," she said. "Can't." He didn't look at her. "They'll come soon. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, but soon." "How do you know?" "Because if I was Cyrus, I wouldn't wait. I'd hit hard while my enemy is still organizing, still scared." Ronan's jaw tightened. "He knows I sent those ledgers, knows he's on borrowed time, so he'll throw everything at us, try to end this fast." Eliza stood beside him, looking out at the land she'd fought so hard to keep. In the growing light, it looked almost peaceful, beautiful even. "When this is over," she said, "if we survive, what will you do?" "Leave, like I promised. And go where?" "Doesn't matter." Ronan finally glanced at her. "Why?" "Because I'm trying to figure you out. Trying to understand why a man who's spent his life running would suddenly decide to stand and fight. I told you I owe a debt. To Thomas, to me." Eliza studied his profile. "But I think there's more to it. I think you're tired of being the villain in your own story." Ronan's laugh was bitter. "If that's what I'm doing, it's not working. More people are dead because of me now than ever." "Daniel Taylor died because evil men don't value life, not because of you. That's generous." "No, it's true." Eliza's voice was firm. "You didn't pull that trigger. You didn't burn his barn. Evil people did that, and they'll keep doing it unless someone stops them. And you think that someone is me. I think that someone is us." She met his eyes. "You? Me? The people down there preparing to fight. We're all choosing to stand. That has to count for something." Before Ronan could respond, a shout went up from the perimeter. They both turned, hands going to weapons. "Riders!" James Wright yelled from his position near the barn. "Coming fast from the north." Eliza's heart kicked against her ribs. Ronan was already moving, running down the slope with his rifle. She followed, her boots sliding on loose rock. By the time they reached the barn, everyone was in motion. Men scrambling to positions, women herding children toward the house. The controlled chaos of people trying to remember training in the face of real danger. "How many?" Ronan called to Wright. "Can't tell. Maybe 6, maybe more. Still too far." Ronan climbed up on the barn roof, using his hand to shade his eyes against the rising sun. Eliza joined him, her stomach churning. The riders were coming hard, kicking up dust. As they got closer, she could make out details, dark clothes, rifles, the kind of men who made violence a profession. 8, Ronan said. "Could be advanced scouts, could be the whole force. Either way, this is it." He dropped down, started issuing orders. His voice was calm, authoritative, the voice of someone who'd done this before. "Let them get close. Wait for my signal. Don't waste ammunition on long shots. Aim, breathe, squeeze. And for the love of everything, don't shoot each other." The riders were close enough now that Eliza could see their faces. Hard men, confident men. They rode like they owned the world, and everyone in it was just renting. They stopped about 100 yards out, just beyond effective rifle range. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then one of them rode forward, a lean man with silver hair and a scar that ran from his eye to his jaw. He stopped 50 yards from the barn, well within shooting distance, and called out, "Ronan Hale! I know you're in there!" Ronan stepped into view, his rifle held loose but ready. "I'm here. My name is Marcus Webb. I work for Cyrus Taggart. He wants his property back. Don't have it. Sent it to the federal marshal in Carson City 3 weeks ago." Ronan's voice carried across the yard. "Tell Cyrus he's done." Webb laughed. "You always were a bad liar, Hale. Cyrus knows you didn't send shit. You're too smart for that. You'd keep it as insurance bargaining chip. So here's the deal. You hand over those ledgers, and we ride out. No one else has to die. And if I refuse, then we burn this place to ash and everyone in it." Webb's smile was cold. "Your choice. You got 5 minutes." He turned his horse, rode back to his men. They sat there waiting, rifles across their saddles. Eliza moved to Ronan's side. He's bluffing about the ledger still being here. No, he's not. Ronan didn't look at her. I lied. They're in the barn, hidden. I couldn't risk the mail getting intercepted. The words hit her like a fist. You what? I'm sorry. I couldn't tell you before. Couldn't trust anyone. He finally met her eyes. But they're real, Eliza. Everything I said about Cyrus, about what he's done, it's all in those books. If they reach the right people, he'll hang. Then give them to Webb. End this. Can't. Because even if I do, Cyrus will still kill everyone here. We're witnesses now. He can't leave us alive. Eliza felt cold spread through her chest. So we fight. We fight. Ronan raised his voice. Positions. Here they come. The 5 minutes weren't up yet, but Webb and his men were already moving. They split into 2 groups, 4 riding hard for the house, 4 circling toward the barn. Now, Ronan shouted. The world exploded. Gunfire erupted from the trenches, from the barn windows, from the house. Bullets kicked up dirt around the charging riders. One of them jerked in the saddle, then tumbled off his horse, hitting the ground hard. Webb's men returned fire, their shots wild but numerous. Wood splintered, glass shattered. Someone screamed from the house. A woman's voice, sharp with pain. Eliza raised her rifle, found a target, fired, missed. The recoil jarred her shoulder. She worked the bolt, aimed again, squeezed. This time the rider flinched, clutching his arm, but stayed mounted. Ronan fired methodically beside her, each shot deliberate. Another rider went down, then another, but there were still 5, and they were getting closer. Fall back, Ronan yelled. Get to the house! They ran across open ground, bullets whipping past. Eliza's lungs burned. Her legs felt like water. Behind her she heard horses, hoofbeats getting louder. She dove through the doorway just as a bullet punched through the frame where her head had been. Ronan was right behind her, slamming the door and dropping the bar. Inside was chaos. Mrs. Chen was trying to stop the bleeding from a woman's shoulder. Children were crying. Men were reloading weapons with shaking hands. Windows, Ronan ordered. Keep them back! Eliza ran to the kitchen window, knocked out the remaining glass with her rifle barrel. Outside, Webb's men had dismounted, using the outbuildings for cover. They were organized, professional, advancing with covering fire. She aimed at movement, fired. The figure ducked back. She worked the bolt, tried to find another target, but they were too careful now, too smart. They're going to rush us, Ronan said from across the room. When they do, don't stop shooting. Make every bullet count. A bottle arced through the air, trailing fire. It shattered against the barn, and flames immediately began climbing the dry wood. They're burning us out, James Wright yelled. Another bottle. This one hit the porch, spreading burning oil across the boards. Smoke began to seep through the gaps in the door. We can't stay here, Pastor William said, his voice tight. We'll cook. Ronan's face was grim. He looked at Eliza, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Uncertainty, fear. The root cellar, she said. Get the women and children down there. The rest of us make a stand. That's suicide, Wright protested. So is staying here. Eliza worked her rifle bolt. Move! They got the non-combatants down the narrow stairs into the earth-packed cellar just as the front wall started to burn. The heat was immediate, terrible. Smoke filled the room, making eyes water and throats close. 5 men remained topside with Eliza and Ronan, 5 against however many were still out there. The rush came from 2 sides at once. Webb's men burst through windows and kicked in the burning door, guns blazing. The defenders fired back, and the small house became hell. Muzzle flashes and smoke, screaming, the wet sound of bullets hitting flesh. Eliza shot a man climbing through the window. He fell backwards, gone before she could think about it. Worked the bolt. Shot another. The rifle kicked. Her ears rang. Everything was noise and fear and the animal drive to survive. Ronan fought like something inhuman, moving, shooting, never still. His face was spattered with blood, his eyes cold, distant. He'd become what he'd always been, Eliza realized. A killer. The best kind. The kind that kept you alive. Then Webb was there, coming through the smoke with his pistol raised. He shot James Wright in the chest, and the rancher went down without a sound. Turned toward Ronan, finger tightening. Eliza screamed a warning, but it was lost in the gunfire. Ronan spun, brought his rifle up, too slow. The shot that saved him came from the doorway. Sarah Taylor stood there with a smoking rifle, her face streaked with tears and soot. Webb staggered, looked down at the hole in his chest, then at her. "For Daniel," Sarah said, and shot him again. Webb collapsed. Around him, his remaining men faltered, seeing their leader down. That moment of hesitation was enough. "Out!" someone yelled. "Fall back!" The attackers broke, running for their horses. Ronan moved to pursue, but Eliza grabbed his arm. "Let them go. We won. They'll regroup, come back with more. Then we'll be ready." She looked around the burning room at the bodies and blood and the people who'd survived. "But right now we need to save what's left." They fought the fire for an hour, bucket brigades from the well, wet blankets beating at flames. The barn was lost, fully engulfed. But they saved the house, barely. The front wall was charred, 2 rooms gutted, but the structure held. When it was over, they counted the cost. James Wright dead, 2 others wounded, 1 seriously. 3 of Webb's men dead in the yard, including Webb himself. The rest had fled. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it just felt like survival. Temporary. Fragile. As the sun climbed higher, Eliza stood in the ruins of her home and wondered how many more battles they could endure before there was nothing left to save. They buried James Wright at sunset. The ground was hard, the work slow. Pastor Williams spoke words over the grave that Eliza barely heard, her mind elsewhere, counting ammunition, calculating how many days they could hold, wondering when the next attack would come. Sarah Taylor stood beside Wright's widow, Margaret, who held her 2 young sons while they cried. The boys didn't understand why their father wasn't coming home. Eliza envied them that ignorance. When it was done, when the last shovel of earth covered the grave, people drifted back toward the damaged house in small groups. Nobody spoke much. Exhaustion hung over them like fog. Ronan hadn't come to the burial. Eliza found him in what remained of the barn, pulling charred boards aside, searching through the debris. His hands were blackened with soot, his face grim. "What are you doing?" "Looking for the ledgers." He tossed aside a burned beam. "They were hidden in the back stall. If the fire got to them, then we've got nothing," Eliza finished. She grabbed a board, helped him dig. "How long before Cyrus sends more men?" "Days? Maybe less." Ronan paused, wiping sweat from his forehead and leaving a streak of ash. Webb was his second in command. Smart, experienced. If he's dead, Cyrus will come himself or send someone worse. "There's worse than Webb." "Always." Ronan pulled aside more debris, then stopped. His hand disappeared into a gap between boards, and when it emerged, he held a leather satchel, miraculously intact. He opened it carefully. Inside were 3 ledgers, their pages yellowed but readable. Names, dates, transactions. A record of every crime Cyrus Taggart had committed or ordered for the past 5 years. "This is it," Ronan said quietly. "This is what they're dying for." Eliza took one of the ledgers, flipped through it. The entries were meticulous, written in a neat hand she assumed was Ronan's. Each page documented theft, extortion, murder, the casual notation of evil, reduced to numbers and names. "Why didn't you destroy these?" she asked. "If you wanted to be free of him, why keep the evidence?" "Because men like Cyrus don't stop. They keep taking, keep hurting, until someone makes them stop." Ronan's jaw tightened. "I thought if I could get these to the right person, maybe something good could come from all the bad I'd done. Maybe I could balance the scales a little." "You can't balance scales with blood on them." "No, but you can try." He took the ledger back, returned it to the satchel. "I need to get these to Carson City, to Marshal Hendricks. He's the only one I trust to use them right." "That's 3 days' ride, maybe more." "I know." "And if Cyrus attacks while you're gone?" Ronan looked at her and she saw the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of impossible choices. "Then you hold without me, or you surrender. Give them whatever they want and live." "You know I won't do that." "I know, but I'm asking anyway." He stood, the satchel clutched in his hand. "These ledgers are worth more than my life, Eliza, worth more than yours. If they reach Hendricks, Cyrus goes to prison, or worse. Dozens of people get justice, maybe hundreds. And if they don't reach him, if Cyrus catches you on the road, then I die knowing I tried." Ronan's voice was matter-of-fact. "I've made peace with that." Eliza wanted to argue, to tell him it was suicide to ride out alone. But she could see the determination in his face, The same stubborn resolve she'd seen in her father when he'd refused to give up the ranch, even as the fever consumed him. "When do you leave?" "Tonight, under cover of darkness. With luck, I'll be in Carson City before Cyrus knows I'm gone." "And without luck?" Ronan didn't answer. He didn't need to. They returned to the house together, where the remaining defenders were eating a cold supper and trying to pretend they weren't terrified. Mrs. Chen had organized the women into shifts, cooking, tending the wounded, keeping watch on the children. The men cleaned weapons and spoke in low voices about fields of fire and ammunition counts. It looked like community, like people pulling together. But Eliza could see the cracks, the way Margaret Wright wouldn't look at anyone, the haunted expression on Sarah Taylor's face, the trembling hands of farmers who'd killed men for the first time. Pastor Williams pulled her aside while Ronan spoke with the men. "How much longer can we hold?" he asked quietly. "I don't know. Days, maybe. Depends on how many men Cyrus sends. And what happens when we run out of ammunition? When more of us die?" The pastor's voice was strained. "Eliza, I supported this because I believed we had a chance. But Wright is dead, others are wounded. At what point do we admit this fight is already lost?" "It's not lost. Isn't it? Look around. Half these people are ready to break. The other half are here because they're too stubborn or too scared to leave." "Which half are you?" Eliza asked. Williams was quiet for a moment. "I don't know anymore. I came here believing in justice, in doing the right thing. But every time I close my eyes, I see Wright's body. I hear his sons crying. And I wonder if this is what righteousness looks like, or if it's just pride dressed up in prettier words." "It's both," Eliza admitted. "But that doesn't make it wrong. Doesn't make it right either." The pastor rubbed his face, suddenly looking much older. "I'll stay. We all will for now. But Eliza, if this goes on much longer, people will start leaving, and I won't blame them." That night, Eliza helped Ronan prepare for the journey. She packed food he probably wouldn't have time to eat, checked his weapons, made sure his horse was sound. Small practical things that kept her hands busy and her mind from racing. They worked in silence until Ronan finally spoke. "If I don't make it back, don't. Eliza, I said don't." She looked up from the saddlebag she was packing. "You're going to ride to Carson City, deliver those ledgers, and ride back. That's the plan. I don't want to hear about alternatives. You need to be realistic. I need you to shut up and let me pretend this isn't insane." Her voice cracked slightly. "Because if I stop to think about what could go wrong, I'll lose my nerve. And I can't afford that right now." Ronan studied her face, then nodded slowly. "All right." They finished in silence. When the horse was ready, Ronan swung into the saddle. The moon was rising, full and bright. Good for travel. Bad for staying hidden. "Keep everyone inside after dark," he said. "Post watches and shifts so people can rest. Don't let anyone wander off alone. And if Cyrus comes before I'm back, I know what to do." "Do you?" Ronan leaned down slightly, his eyes serious. "Because running isn't cowardice, Eliza. If it comes down to your life or this land, you choose your life, you hear me?" "My father would disagree. Your father isn't here. I am. And I'm telling you that no piece of ground is worth dying for." "Then why are you risking everything to stop Cyrus?" Eliza challenged. "If land and principles don't matter, why not just run? You could be in Mexico by now. Because Cyrus will keep hurting people as long as he's free. That's different." "No, it's not. You're fighting for what you think is right. I'm fighting for what's mine. We're both too stubborn to quit." She stepped back. "So go. Deliver your ledgers and come back alive. That's an order." The ghost of a smile touched Ronan's face. "Yes, ma'am." He rode out into the darkness, and Eliza stood watching until the sound of hoofbeats faded. Then she turned back to the burned and broken ranch, to the people inside who were counting on her, and tried to figure out how to hold a fortress with farmers and faith. The first day without Ronan passed in tense anticipation. Eliza reorganized the watch schedule, making sure everyone got rest. She worked alongside the men to reinforce the barricades, to clear fields of fire, to prepare for an attack that could come at any moment. The physical labor helped, kept her mind busy. But at night, alone in her damaged bedroom, the doubt crept in. What if Ronan didn't make it? What if Cyrus was already on the road hunting him? What if the ledgers were destroyed and all of this, Wright's death, the burned barn, the terror in children's eyes, was for nothing? She pushed the thoughts away and checked her rifle for the 100th time. The second day brought visitors. A wagon rolled up the valley road around midday, driven by a man Eliza recognized from town, Samuel Chen, Mrs. Chen's nephew. Behind him rode 4 more men, all armed. "We heard there was trouble," Samuel called out. "Figured you could use some help." It wasn't much. 5 more guns, a few crates of ammunition, some medical supplies. But the gesture, people coming to stand with them despite the danger, made Eliza's throat tight. "Thank you," she said simply. "Where's your husband?" Samuel asked, dismounting. "Riding to Carson City, taking evidence to the marshal." Samuel's eyebrows rose. "Alone? That's either brave or stupid. Probably both." Eliza helped unload the wagon. "How many people stayed in town?" "Most. They're scared, but they're also angry." "What happened to Wright, to the Taylors?" "It's got people talking. Some are saying we should form a militia, go after these criminals ourselves. That's a good way to get more people killed." "Maybe, but it's better than sitting around waiting to be victims." Samuel glanced at the burned barn, the damaged house. "How bad was it?" "Bad enough." He nodded, didn't press. They got the supplies inside and integrated the new arrivals into the watch rotation. It meant everyone could sleep a little more, worry a little less. That night, Mrs. Chen pulled Eliza aside. "Samuel told me what your husband is doing, riding to the marshal." "Yes. That's either very brave or very foolish." "I've heard that assessment." Eliza managed a tired smile. "Honestly, I don't know which it is." Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment, her sharp eyes studying Eliza's face. "You care for him, more than you expected to." It wasn't a question. Eliza wanted to deny it, to say that Ronan was just a means to an end, a necessary alliance, but the words stuck in her throat. "I don't know what I feel," she admitted. "He brought danger here, got people killed, but he's also fighting to make it right, even if it costs him everything. That has to count for something." "Intention matters less than results," Mrs. Chen said. "But yes, it counts. Just don't let sentiment make you stupid. If things go bad, if Cyrus comes before your husband returns, you save yourself and the people who depend on you. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Chen nodded, satisfied, and returned to the kitchen where she'd been organizing food stores. Eliza stood alone in the hallway, wondering when everyone had started calling Ronan her husband like it was real, like they were actually married instead of just legally bound. The third day brought the storm. It rolled in fast from the west. Dark clouds, lightning, the kind of weather that turned roads into rivers and made travel impossible. Eliza stood on the porch, watching rain hammer the valley, and tried not to think about Ronan caught in it somewhere between here and Carson City. "He'll be fine," Pastor Williams said, joining her. "Man like that doesn't let weather stop him. Weather isn't what I'm worried about. Cyrus, or bandits, or a dozen other things that can kill a man on the road." Eliza wrapped her arms around herself. "He should have taken someone with him. Shouldn't have gone alone. Would you have let him take one of the men? We can barely hold this place with the people we have." "No, but that doesn't make it less stupid." They stood watching the storm, the rain so thick it was hard to see beyond the yard. Somewhere out there, Ronan was riding through this. Or maybe he'd found shelter, or maybe he was already dead, and they just didn't know it yet. The thought made Eliza's chest tight. "When this is over," William said quietly, "what will you do?" "Rebuild. What else?" "I met with him, with Ronan. He said he'd leave, that you could dissolve the marriage." "That's the plan. Is it what you want?" Eliza didn't answer right away. The truth was, she hadn't let herself think that far ahead. Survival had consumed everything, the immediate threat, the next attack, the question of whether they'd live through the week. "I don't know," she finally said. "I married him because I was desperate, because I needed help and he was there. That's not exactly a foundation for anything lasting. Maybe not, but I've seen the way you work together, the trust, even when you don't want to trust him. That's worth something. Or it's just necessity." Williams smiled slightly. "Sometimes the best relationships start with necessity. My wife and I married because her father owed mine a debt. We had nothing in common, didn't particularly like each other. But 30 years later, I can't imagine life without her. That's different. Is it? You chose each other, even if the reasons weren't romantic. You're fighting together, building something together, even if it's just survival. He paused. That's more than a lot of marriages start with. Before Eliza could respond, a shout went up from the watchpost. Riders, east side! They ran inside, grabbing weapons. Through the rain, Eliza could see shapes moving. 3 riders, coming fast. Her heart hammered. Was this the attack? Had Cyrus found them while Ronan was gone? But as the riders got closer, she recognized the lead horse. Hold fire, she yelled. It's Ronan. He rode into the yard like death warmed over, soaked, exhausted, swaying in the saddle. 2 men rode with him, both wearing marshal badges. Eliza ran out into the rain, helped him dismount before he fell. Up close, she could see the blood on his coat, the way he favored his left side. You're hurt. Got jumped on the road. Ronan's voice was hoarse. Cyrus had men waiting, knew I'd try for Carson City. But you made it. Barely. He gestured to the marshals. This is Hendricks and his deputy. They read the ledgers. They're here to help. Marshal Hendricks was a broad man with a weather-beaten face and eyes that missed nothing. He dismounted, looked around the damaged ranch, the armed defenders, the burned barn. Quite a setup you've got here, he said. How many men does Taggart have in the area? Unknown, Ronan said, leaning heavily against his horse. But he's coming, soon. This is where it ends. They got Ronan inside, sat him down while Mrs. Chen examined his wound. A bullet grazed along his ribs, painful but not fatal. She cleaned it with whiskey that made him hiss through his teeth, then wrapped it tight. You're an idiot, she told him. Riding that hard with a wound like this. Didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. You just made a stupid one. But her hands were gentle as she worked, and when she finished, she pressed a cup of something hot into his hands. Drink. You look like death. Marshal Hendricks spread the ledgers on the table, studying them with his deputy. Both men's expressions grew darker as they read. This is enough to hang him twice over, Hendricks said finally. But getting a warrant issued and served is going to take time. Time I'm guessing you don't have. No, Ronan agreed. Cyrus will move fast. He knows I made it to you, knows those ledgers are no longer his secret. He'll come with everything he has, try to eliminate the witnesses. Us. Everyone here. Ronan looked around the room. He can't afford to leave anyone alive who knows what's in those books. Then we make this place a trap, Hendricks said. My deputy rides for backup. There's a federal cavalry unit 2 days north. They can be here in 3, maybe 4 days. Until then, we hold. 4 days? Pastor Williams said quietly. Can we hold that long? We don't have a choice, Eliza said. She looked at Ronan, at the marshals, at the frightened faces of her neighbors. We've come this far. We see it through. That night, they prepared for the final battle. Hendricks had military experience, and it showed. He reorganized their defenses, positioned people better, showed them tricks for conserving ammunition and maximizing coverage. The man was competent, confident, and his presence seemed to steady everyone. Even wounded, Ronan worked alongside him, adding his own brutal knowledge of how men like Cyrus operated. Together, they turned the ranch into something resembling a real fortification. Eliza found herself caught between them, Hendricks with his official authority and tactical knowledge, Ronan with his intimate understanding of the enemy. Both men deferred to her about the land, about the people, treating her not as a woman to be protected, but as a partner in the fight. It should have felt empowering. Instead, it just felt heavy. Around midnight, when the rain had finally stopped and the defenders were sleeping in shifts, Eliza stepped outside for air. The valley was quiet, the stars bright now that the clouds had passed. Ronan joined her, moving stiffly because of his wound. You should be resting, she said. Can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see the road, the ambush. He leaned against the porch rail. They were waiting for me, Eliza. Knew exactly where I'd be. If I'd been 10 minutes slower, if my horse hadn't spooked at the right moment, I'd be dead. But you're not. No, I'm here, and I brought federal law with me. He looked at her. Hendricks is a good man. When this is done, he'll make sure Cyrus faces justice. If we survive, when we survive. Ronan's voice was firm. We've come too far to lose now. Eliza wanted to believe him, wanted to have his certainty, But all she could think about was Wright's grave, Sarah's dead eyes, the children who'd watched their fathers die. "How many more?" she asked quietly. "What? How many more graves will we dig before this is over? How many more families will be broken?" Ronan didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was soft. "I don't know. But I know that if we quit now, if we let Cyrus win, it'll be worse. He'll keep taking, keep hurting, and everything we've sacrificed will mean nothing. Sometimes I wonder if it already means nothing." "It doesn't." Ronan turned to face her. "You held this place when anyone else would have run. You stood up for your neighbors, for people who barely trusted you. You've been stronger than anyone had a right to expect. That means something." "Does it? Because from where I'm standing, all I see is ash and blood and fear." "Then you're not looking close enough." He gestured to the house behind them. "Look at what you built here. People who were strangers a week ago, now fighting together. A community forged in fire." "That's not nothing, Eliza. That's everything." She wanted to argue, to point out all the ways this was falling apart, but looking at the house, seeing the soft glow of lamplight through the windows, hearing the low voices of people keeping watch. Maybe he was right. Maybe what they'd built here was worth the cost. Or maybe she was just too tired to know the difference anymore. The attack came at dawn on the fourth day. Eliza woke to gunfire and screaming, adrenaline kicking her body into motion before her mind fully caught up. She grabbed her rifle, ran to the window, and felt her heart stop. Cyrus Taggart had brought an army. 20 riders, maybe more, spread across the valley in a coordinated assault. They came from 3 directions at once, firing as they rode, their tactics professional and brutal. "Positions!" Hendricks roared. "Return fire!" The defenders scrambled to their posts, rifles barking, but the difference in numbers was immediate and terrible. For every shot they got off, 5 came back. Windows shattered, walls splintered. Someone screamed from the back room. A hit. Eliza fired, reloaded, fired again. Her hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over. She saw a rider fall, then another, but more kept coming. Ronan was at the front window, his face set in grim determination despite the blood seeping through his bandages. He fired with mechanical precision, each shot finding its mark. "They're going to flank us," the deputy yelled. He was right. A group of riders had split off, circling around to hit the exposed west side. If they got through, they'd have the defenders in a crossfire. "I'll stop them," Samuel Chen said, grabbing extra ammunition. "You'll die," Hendricks said flatly. "Probably. But someone has to slow them down." Samuel looked at his aunt, gave her a small smile. "Tell my mother I tried to be brave." He ran out the back before anyone could stop him, heading for the damaged barn where he'd have a better angle. Eliza watched him go, wanted to call him back, but there wasn't time. The flanking riders were getting closer. Samuel made it to the barn, took position behind a burned support beam. His rifle started firing, controlled, steady shots that dropped 2 riders and forced the others to scatter. But there were too many. They concentrated fire on his position, bullets tearing through the burned wood. Samuel kept shooting, kept fighting, until a bullet caught him in the head and he disappeared from view. Mrs. Chen made a sound like something dying. Then she picked up her nephew's rifle and took his place at the window. The battle raged. Minutes felt like hours. Eliza's shoulder ached from the recoil. Her ears rang so badly she could barely hear. Smoke filled the house, making eyes water and throats burn. A rider made it to the porch, kicked in what was left of the door. Ronan met him with a knife, brutal and fast. The man went down screaming. Another climbed through the kitchen window. Pastor William shot him, then immediately vomited from the violence of it. They were being overwhelmed. Eliza could see it happening, the defenders tiring, ammunition running low, fear beginning to outweigh courage. Another few minutes and the line would break. Then, from the north, she heard it. Bugles. The clear, bright sound of cavalry. Hendricks' backup had arrived a day early. Federal soldiers poured into the valley on horseback, their rifles firing in disciplined volleys. Cyrus's men, caught between the defenders and the cavalry, broke immediately. Those who could fled. Those who couldn't surrendered or died. The gunfire sputtered, then stopped. In the sudden silence, Eliza could hear her own heartbeat, loud and frantic. She looked around the ruined house, at the faces of the survivors. Shell-shocked, wounded, but alive. They'd held. The cavalry captain rode up to the house, dismounted. He spoke briefly with Hendricks, then looked at the defenders with something like respect. You people did good work here, held against odds that should have broken you. Tell that to the ones who didn't make it, Mrs. Chen said quietly, still staring out the window where her nephew had fallen. The captain had no response to that. Instead, he organized his men to round up the survivors, to tend to the wounded on both sides. Cyrus Taggart was found trying to flee on foot. His horse shot out from under him. 2 soldiers brought him to the house in chains, his face bloody and furious. He looked at Ronan with pure hatred. You're dead, you hear me? Dead. You'll make sure of nothing, Hendricks interrupted. Cyrus Taggart, you're under arrest for murder, extortion, robbery, and about 15 other charges. You'll hang for this. Federal courts take months. I'll be free before... You'll die in prison waiting for trial. Hendricks nodded to the soldiers. Take him away. As they dragged Cyrus off, still screaming threats, Ronan swayed on his feet. Eliza caught him before he fell, feeling the fever heat of his skin. Your wound's infected, she said. I know. He managed a weak smile. But we won. We actually won. Then his eyes rolled back and he collapsed. Eliza held him while the army surgeon was called, while Mrs. Chen brought clean water and bandages, while the world kept spinning and the sun kept rising like they hadn't just survived hell. She held him and refused to let go. Ronan burned with fever for 3 days. The army surgeon, a gruff man named Patterson who'd seen too many field hospitals, cleaned the infected wound and said it could go either way. The bullet graze had festered during the hard ride, and now poison was spreading through his blood. Keep him cool, Patterson instructed. Make him drink water even if he fights you. If the fever breaks, he'll live. If it doesn't... He didn't finish the sentence. Eliza took shifts with Mrs. Chen, wiping Ronan's face with wet cloths, forcing water past his cracked lips, listening to him mumble fragments of nightmares she couldn't understand. Sometimes he called out names, Thomas, people she didn't know, ghosts from a past he'd never fully shared. On the second night, he grabbed her wrist with surprising strength, his eyes open but unseeing. I'm sorry, he rasped. Should have protected them. Should have done better. Ronan, you're burning up. You need to rest. The family, the children. I didn't stop him fast enough. His grip tightened. 6 years old. She was 6. Eliza realized he was talking about the family Cyrus had murdered, the one that had finally made him steal the ledgers, the memory that haunted him even in fever dreams. You stopped him, she said firmly. Cyrus is in chains. He'll hang. Because of you. Too late. Always too late. No. You saved dozens of people by standing up to him. You saved this town. You saved me. She covered his hand with hers. That has to count for something. He stared at her, fever-bright eyes searching her face. Then he said something so quietly she almost missed it. Don't want to leave. Her throat tightened. Then don't. Just rest. Get better first. Then we'll figure out the rest. His eyes closed and his grip loosened. She sat there holding his hand while the lamp burned low and the night sounds filtered through the broken windows. The fever broke on the morning of the 4th day. Eliza had dozed off in the chair beside his bed when she felt him stir. She jerked awake to find him looking at her with clear eyes, the terrible heat finally gone from his skin. You look awful, he said, his voice hoarse but steady. Relief flooded through her so fast it made her dizzy. You're one to talk. You've been trying to die for 3 days. Didn't take, though. He tried to sit up, grimaced at the pain. How bad is it? The ranch? The people? Samuel Chen is dead. 2 others from the cavalry were killed in the fight, 5 more wounded but recovering. Eliza helped him settle back against the pillows. The barn's gone completely. House needs major repairs, but we held. And Cyrus is in federal custody. The ledgers? With Marshal Hendricks, he says they're enough to convict Cyrus 10 times over. Along with witness testimony, the evidence is ironclad. Ronan exhaled slowly, some tension leaving his shoulders. Then it's done. Almost. Eliza stood, poured him water from the pitcher. The cavalry is staying for another week to make sure none of Cyrus's remaining men come looking for revenge. After that, we're on our own again. We. He took the water, drank carefully. You keep saying we. Force of habit. Is it? His gray eyes studied her. Because I seem to remember telling you I'd leave when this was over. Give you back your life, your reputation. Eliza sat back down, suddenly unsure what to say. She'd had 4 days to think about this moment, and she still didn't have an answer. You did say that, she agreed, but you don't want me to go. It wasn't a question. Eliza met his gaze, saw something in it that made her chest tight. Hope, maybe, or fear of rejection. Emotion she hadn't expected from a man who'd seemed carved from stone when she first met him. I don't know what I want, she said honestly. A month ago, I wanted to save my land. I would have done anything, married anyone to keep it. Then you showed up and everything got complicated. That's one word for it. You brought violence and death. Got people killed. Turned my home into a battlefield. She paused. But you also stood when you could have run, fought for people who weren't your responsibility, tried to make amends for things you did wrong. That doesn't balance out, never will. Maybe not, but it means something. Eliza looked down at her hands, calloused and scarred from weeks of fighting and work. My father used to say that the measure of a person isn't what they do when things are easy. It's what they do when everything's falling apart, and quitting would be simpler. Sounds like a wise man. He was. Stubborn as hell, but wise. She looked back at Ronan. You could have walked away a dozen times. Could have let Cyrus win. Let us all die. Saved yourself. But you didn't. Because I owed Thomas. At first, maybe. But somewhere along the way, it became more than that. Eliza leaned forward. You started fighting for the people here. For this community. For... She trailed off. For you, Ronan finished quietly. Yeah. Somewhere along the way, it became about you. The admission hung between them. Outside, Eliza could hear the sounds of reconstruction, hammers, voices, the slow work of putting a broken place back together. So what happens now? She asked. That's up to you. This is your land, your life. He gestured vaguely. I'm just the stranger who stumbled into it. You're my husband, legally, at least. That can be undone. Annulment, divorce, whatever you want. I won't fight it. Eliza thought about the past month. The terror and violence, yes, but also the moments in between, working alongside him to fortify the ranch, the quiet conversations during watch shifts, the way he deferred to her judgment even when his experience said otherwise. The respect he'd shown her when most men wouldn't have. What if I don't want it undone? She heard herself say. Ronan went very still. Eliza, I'm not saying I love you. I don't know if I do. We barely know each other, and what we do know came from the worst circumstances imaginable. She took a breath. But I also don't hate you, and I think maybe if we had time without people shooting at us, we could figure out if there's something real here. You deserve better than me. Probably, but I've learned that deserving and getting are two different things. She managed a small smile. Besides, you're the only husband I've got. Might as well see if we can make it work. I've done terrible things. The man I was before I met you is not the man sitting here now. Eliza cut him off. People change, Ronan. You proved that. And maybe you'll never forgive yourself for your past, but that doesn't mean I can't. He looked at her for a long moment, something complicated moving across his face. Then carefully, he reached out and took her hand. If I stay, he said slowly, if we try this, you need to know it won't be easy. I've got enemies beyond Cyrus, debts and grudges from my old life. They might come looking. Then we'll deal with them, together. And I'm not good at the things normal husbands do. I don't know how to be gentle or romantic or whatever it is you're supposed to be. I don't need gentle. I need a partner, someone who'll work beside me, stand with me when things get hard. Eliza squeezed his hand. Can you do that? Yes? No hesitation. But you need to promise me something. What? If I start to become the man I was, if you see that darkness taking over again, you'll tell me. You'll walk away if you need to. Don't let me drag you down. Deal. But the same goes for you. If this gets to be too much, if you need to leave, you tell me. No disappearing in the night. I can do that. They sat there holding hands while morning light filtered through the damaged walls, two broken people trying to figure out if their pieces fit together. The reconstruction took months. With the cavalry's help, they buried the dead properly. Samuel Chen got a grave beside James Wright, both men remembered as heroes who'd stood against evil. The town came together for the services, and even people who'd refused to fight showed up to pay respects. Sarah Taylor spoke at Samuel's burial, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. Samuel didn't have to fight, didn't have to risk everything for people he barely knew. But he did it anyway, because that's what good men do. They stand up when it matters. She looked at the crowd. Daniel did the same. And I won't let their sacrifice be forgotten. None of us should. The words hit hard. Eliza saw people nodding, saw shame on some faces, determination on others. The town had been tested, and while not everyone had passed, enough had stood firm to matter. In the weeks that followed, people came to help rebuild the Carter Ranch without being asked. Farmers brought lumber. Tradesmen offered skills. Even those who'd voted against fighting showed up with hammers and nails, trying to make amends in the only way they knew how. The barn went up first, a community effort that took 2 weeks of hard labor. It wasn't as big as the old one, but it was solid, built to last. When they raised the final beam, someone produced a bottle of whiskey, and they all drank to new beginnings. The house took longer. While they worked, Eliza and Ronan lived in the bunkhouse that the cavalry had helped construct. It was small, cramped, but it forced them to learn each other's rhythms. How Ronan woke before dawn and couldn't settle until he'd checked the perimeter. How Eliza needed coffee before she could be civil. The small domestic details that made up a life together. They didn't share a bed. Not yet. Both of them dancing around that final intimacy, neither quite ready to take the step. But they worked together, ate together, made decisions together. Slowly, cautiously, they built something that started to feel like a partnership. One evening, about 2 months after the final battle, they sat on the half-finished porch watching the sunset. "I got a letter from Hendricks," Ronan said. "Cyrus's trial is set for next month. He wants us to testify." "Both of us?" "Yeah. Says our testimony about the attacks, the murders, will help seal the conviction." Eliza considered this. Going back, reliving it all in a courtroom. "Will you go?" "If you will. But I won't lie. Seeing him again won't be easy." "Nothing about this has been easy." She leaned against the porch rail. "But if it means Cyrus hangs, if it means justice for Daniel and Samuel and everyone else, then yes, I'll testify." "We'll go together then." The trial took place in Carson City, in a federal courthouse that smelled of old wood and older justice. Cyrus Taggart sat in chains, his expensive suit doing nothing to hide the defeated slump of his shoulders. The evidence was overwhelming. The ledgers, the testimony, the physical evidence from the attacks, all of it pointed to guilt. Eliza testified first, describing the attacks on her ranch, on the Taylors, the terror of those weeks. She looked Cyrus in the eye while she spoke and didn't flinch. Ronan's testimony was harder. He laid out his entire history with Cyrus, admitting his own crimes in the process. The prosecution had granted him immunity in exchange for cooperation, but that didn't make the confession easier. "I helped him," Ronan said clearly. "Kept his books, moved his money, looked the other way when he hurt people. I'm not innocent. But when I saw him murder that family, when I watched him kill children for the crime of refusing to sell their land, I knew I couldn't do it anymore. So I took everything that could destroy him and I made sure it reached people who'd use it right." The defense attorney tried to tear him apart, suggested he was lying to save himself, that the ledgers were fabricated. But the evidence spoke for itself. And when Marshal Hendricks took the stand and confirmed that everything in those books matched his own investigation, the case was effectively over. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. Cyrus Taggart was sentenced to hang. The judge set the execution for 3 weeks out, the maximum allowed. As they led him away, Cyrus looked at Ronan one last time. "This isn't over," he spat. "I've got friends. They'll make you pay." "Your friends are in prison or dead," Ronan replied calmly. "And I'm not running anymore. You want me? You know where I'll be." Outside the courthouse, Eliza took Ronan's hand. He was shaking, she realized. The adrenaline and stress finally catching up. "It's done," she said. "Really done this time." "Yeah." He took a breath, let it out slowly. "I thought I'd feel different, relieved or vindicated or something, but I just feel tired." "Then let's go home." "We can be tired there." They rode back to the ranch together, the journey taking 3 days of easy travel. No rushing, no fear of pursuit. Just 2 people on horseback, talking about small things, What crops to plant come spring, whether to get more chickens, how to fix the leak in the kitchen roof. Normal things. Domestic things. The kind of conversations Eliza had never imagined having with Ronan Hale. When they crested the ridge overlooking the valley, Eliza pulled her horse to a stop. Below, the ranch spread out. The new barn, the partially rebuilt house, the fields waiting for spring planting. It looked different than it had months ago, smaller maybe, but also stronger, built by hands that had fought for it. "Home," she said softly. Ronan looked at it too, something in his expression she couldn't quite read. "Yeah, home." They rode down together as the sun set behind them, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber. Winter came hard that year. Snow piled deep, and the work became about survival rather than rebuilding. Keeping animals fed, pipes from freezing, enough wood chopped for the stove. Eliza and Ronan fell into routines born of necessity, him handling the heavy outdoor work, her managing the household and what livestock they'd kept. They still slept in separate rooms in the rebuilt house, but the walls between them were getting thinner. Small touches, her hand on his shoulder when she passed, him brushing snow from her hair when she came inside. The careful dance of two people learning to trust not just with words, but with proximity. One night, during a particularly brutal storm, they sat by the fire after dinner. Ronan was mending harness leather, Eliza darning socks. Comfortable silence broken only by the wind outside and the crackle of flames. "I never thanked you," Ronan said suddenly. Eliza looked up. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For seeing something worth saving when most people would have just seen a killer." "You're not just a killer." "I was. For a long time, that's all I was." He set down the leather, met her eyes. "But you made me want to be something different, someone better." "I didn't make you anything. You chose to change." "Because you gave me a reason to." He paused. "Thomas used to say that people don't change for abstract principles. They change for other people, for connections that matter more than old habits. I never understood what he meant until I met you." Eliza set down her mending, her heart beating faster. "Ronan, I love you." He said it simply, without flourish. "I don't know when it happened exactly. Maybe when you stood up to those men in town, or when you fought beside me in the house, or maybe it was earlier, the first time you looked at me like I was a person instead of a threat. But somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you, and I thought you should know." The declaration hung in the air between them. Eliza's first instinct was to retreat, to hide behind jokes or deflection. But looking at Ronan's face, open and vulnerable in a way she'd never seen, she couldn't do it. "I don't know if I love you," she said honestly. "I care about you. I trust you, which is something I never thought I'd say. But love, I'm not sure I know what that feels like anymore." "That's fair. But," she continued, "I want to find out. With you. If you're willing to be patient while I figure it out." A smile touched his face, small but genuine. "I can be patient. I've got nowhere else I need to be." She stood, crossed to where he sat, and held out her hand. He took it, and she pulled him to his feet. "Stay with me tonight," she said. "Not because we have to, because we want to. See if it feels right." "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm tired of being sure about everything. Tired of calculating every risk." She looked up at him. "You taught me that sometimes you just have to take the leap." They went to her room together, nervous as teenagers despite everything they'd been through. That first night was awkward, halting, two people learning each other in ways that had nothing to do with violence or survival. But it was also tender, careful, the beginning of something neither of them had expected to find. Spring came late but fierce. The snow melted in rushing torrents, turning the valley into a temporary sea. When it finally drained, they started planting wheat, corn, vegetables. Eliza taught Ronan the rhythms of farming, the patience it required, the faith that seeds in dark earth would become food. He took to it better than she expected. The work was hard, physical, and seemed to settle something in him. She'd catch him sometimes, standing in the field at dawn, looking at what they'd planted with something like wonder on his face. Other changes came too. Sarah Taylor began courting the deputy who'd stayed on after the cavalry left. Margaret Wright opened a small school, teaching children, including her own sons. The town, tested by fire, came together in ways it hadn't before. People still had their differences, their arguments and grudges, But there was also a shared understanding that they'd survived something together, that they'd stood when it mattered. One afternoon in early summer, Eliza was in town buying supplies when Pastor Williams pulled her aside. "I wanted you to know," he said, "that the town council met last week. We're naming the new school after Samuel Chen and James Wright, a memorial to what they did." Eliza felt her throat tighten. "That's good. Their families will appreciate it." There was some discussion about adding other names. Thomas Mercer, for one, the man who died before all this started. He deserves to be remembered. "We thought so too." Williams paused. "There was also talk of recognizing your husband, what he did, the price he paid to stop Cyrus. Not everyone agreed, but enough did that I wanted to ask, would Ronan be comfortable with that?" Eliza thought about how to answer. Ronan had made peace with his past, but he didn't seek recognition for it, didn't want to be called a hero. "I'll ask him," she said finally. But knowing Ronan, he'd probably say the real heroes are the ones who didn't survive. Williams nodded. "That's what I figured. But the offer stands. What he did mattered, Eliza. People know that." When she got home and told Ronan about the conversation, he was quiet for a long time. "I don't need my name on a building," he said finally, "but if they want to honor Thomas, I'll support that. He's the one who deserved better than what he got. He'd be proud of you, I think, of what you became. Maybe. Or maybe he'd think I took too long to do the right thing." Ronan looked at her. "Either way, I'm grateful he sent me here. To you." They stood together on the porch of their rebuilt home, watching the sun set over land they'd fought for and earned. Not perfect, not without scars, but theirs. By autumn, the crops came in better than expected. Eliza was able to make her mortgage payment with money to spare. The first time in years she hadn't scrambled for every penny. The relief was enormous, dizzying. "We're going to make it," she told Ronan one evening, holding the bank receipt like it was treasure. "The ranch is going to survive." Never doubted it. He pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. "You're too stubborn to fail." "We're too stubborn," she corrected. "This is ours now, both of us." "Yeah." He said it with wonder, like he still couldn't quite believe it. Ours. That winter, Eliza realized what she'd been too cautious to admit before. She loved him. It wasn't the wild, passionate love of romantic stories. It was quieter than that, deeper. It was trust built through shared hardship. It was watching him gentle a spooked horse with patience she'd never have guessed he possessed. It was the way he consulted her on every decision, treating her as an equal partner. It was coming home after a long day and feeling something settle in her chest when she saw him waiting. She told him on a night when fresh snow was falling, the world outside gone silent and white. "I love you," she said, lying beside him in the darkness. "I've probably loved you for a while, but I needed time to be sure." She felt him shift, turn toward her. "You're sure now?" "Yes. You're difficult and stubborn, and you have nightmares I can't fix. But you're also loyal and brave, and you make me want to be better." She found his hand, laced her fingers through his. "So yes, I love you, Ronan Hale." He was quiet for a moment. Then, his voice rough with emotion. "I never thought I'd have this. A home, a partner, someone who knows what I've done and loves me anyway. Thank you for giving me that. Thank you for staying, for choosing this life over running. Wasn't really a choice. Not once I met you." He pulled her closer. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, Eliza. Even if the path to get here was hell. Maybe especially because of that. Easy things don't stick, but what we built, what we survived together, that's forever." They held each other while snow fell outside and the fire burned low in the stove. Two people who'd started as strangers, bound by desperation and circumstance, who'd found something neither expected in the ruins of their separate battles. Years passed. The ranch prospered. They added more land, more livestock, hired help when they needed it. Ronan never fully lost his edge. He still woke at every strange sound, still kept weapons close, but he learned to live with it, to let Eliza pull him back when the darkness got too close. Sarah Taylor married the deputy, now sheriff, and had 2 more children. Margaret Wright's sons grew up strong, attending the school named after their father. The town expanded slowly, carefully, building something that could last. Cyrus Taggart hanged on schedule, unrepentant to the end. Some of his former associates made noise about revenge, but it came to nothing. Ronan had burned those bridges too thoroughly. One spring morning, 5 years after that first desperate meeting at the train station, Eliza stood on the porch watching Ronan work in the field. He'd shed his shirt despite the cool air, his body lean and scarred and familiar. She was pregnant. 3 months along, though they hadn't told anyone yet. The timing scared her. She was 34, not young for a first child. But there was also joy in it. The idea that from all the death and violence, new life could grow. Ronan saw her watching, waved. She waved back, thinking about how far they'd come, about the woman she'd been, desperate, alone, willing to marry a stranger to save her land, about the man he'd been, running from his past, drowning in guilt, seeing no path forward. Neither of them were those people anymore. They'd been broken down, rebuilt, forged into something stronger through fire and blood and the daily choice to keep trying. It wasn't perfect, probably never would be, but it was real, and it was theirs, and that was enough. Ronan started walking back toward the house, and Eliza went inside to start lunch. Simple domestic routines that had once seemed impossible now made up the fabric of her days. She'd learned something important in those years of fighting and surviving. That home wasn't just land or buildings. It was people choosing to stand together. It was the hard work of staying when leaving would be easier. It was building something worth protecting and then protecting it with everything you had. And sometimes, when you were very lucky, it was falling in love with the stranger who'd shown up to save you and discovering he needed saving too. The past didn't go away. It never did. But it didn't have to define you either. You could acknowledge what you'd done, what had been done to you, and still choose to move forward. Still choose to be better than your worst moments. That evening, over dinner, Eliza told Ronan about the baby. He sat there stunned for a moment, his fork halfway to his mouth. Then a smile spread across his face, genuine, unguarded, the kind she rarely saw. "A baby," he said, voice thick with emotion. "We're having a baby." "Yes. Are you happy about it?" Happy doesn't cover it. He stood, pulled her up and into his arms. Terrified too, if I'm honest. What if I'm a terrible father? What if... "You won't be." Eliza cut him off. "You'll make mistakes, because everyone does. But you'll also love this child, protect them, teach them to be strong. That's all anyone can do. I want them to have a better life than we did. No running, no violence, just peace. Then we'll give them that, together." She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "We'll build them the kind of home we both had to fight for. And we'll teach them that sometimes the best things come from the hardest struggles." They stood there as the sun set through their kitchen window. Two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and made something beautiful anyway. Outside, the land stretched out under darkening skies. Fields they'd planted, fences they'd mended, buildings they'd raised from ash. It wasn't the life either of them had planned, but it was the life they'd chosen, and that made all the difference. Eliza had set out to save her family's ranch. Along the way, she'd saved something more important, herself, and a man who'd forgotten he was worth saving. Together, they'd built not just a home, but a future. One where past mistakes didn't erase present choices. Where redemption wasn't easy, but was possible for those brave enough to try. And as night fell over the valley, over the land that had tested them, and the community they'd helped forge, Eliza Carter Hale understood something her father had tried to teach her years ago. That real strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up when you do. It's about standing beside the people you love when the world tries to tear you apart. It's about choosing hope over despair, action over surrender, love over fear. The frontier was harsh. Life was hard. People made mistakes, hurt each other, failed in ways large and small. But they could also rise above it, could find connection in unlikely places, could turn strangers into family and desperation into determination, could take two broken people and make them whole. That was the real victory. Not the defeated enemy or the saved ranch, but the life they'd built in the aftermath. The love that had grown in soil watered with blood and tears. The promise that tomorrow could be better than yesterday if you were willing to work for it. And as Ronan held her while their child grew in her belly, while the stars came out above land they'd fought to keep, Eliza knew with absolute certainty that every hard choice, every terrifying moment, every sacrifice had been worth it. Because this life, this love, This hard-won peace was everything.